Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm going to talk about the next in my Asimov's science fiction magazine series that is hopefully someday leading me to read the May-June 2025 issue of Asimov's. I got sent originally back to, I think it was 2004, because I was sent back from the 2022 issue with Maria 7 story in it. I was sent back from that to the April-May 2012 issue, which I have here, and which I'm going to talk about tonight. But the lead story in this, The Last Judgment, was a sequel to Men Are Trouble, which was in the 2024 issue that I just recently reviewed. And now stories that are in this issue and are also in the the 2022 issue that I mentioned are leading me to an issue from 2017. I believe it's the July-August issue. And that issue is then going to lead me back to some other stuff that goes all the way back to the 1990s. A couple of series, one of which is by Rudy Rucker and Mark Laidlaw, which I'll be getting into first. And then the other is an Alan Steele series. Now, I originally was going to do a separate video about the cover of this, because it is by one of my favorite illustrators, J.K. Potter. And I think it's an excellent cover. It's one of the better, newer covers on Asimov's science fiction magazine. I do really like it. It's For the Last Judgment by James Patrick Kelly. Unfortunately, as far as doing a separate video just about J.K. Potter, there's materials down in my house in Sheboygan that I wanted to get a hold of to do that video, and I just haven't had a chance to go get them. Mainly a book called Horror Publications by J.K. Potter that I have that shows a lot of his early work. So then, this is an excellent cover. J.K. Potter is best known for photo montages, which back in the 1980s, that meant doing it in a darkroom. These days, he might be doing it digitally. This one, yeah, I'm going to guess that he's got a lot of digital pieces here, because I don't know how you'd have to create these models to do any kind of photo of them. I mean, that could be a photo, but I just don't know. I don't know how he created this. I know nothing about the creation of this particular image. And so I need to do more research into J.K. Potter. But that is, it's not my favorite J.K. Potter, but it's a really good example of what Potter did. And, well, it's definitely an illustration for The Last Judgment. It's a very good illustration for that story, showing the three main characters involved. I'm going to break The Last Judgment out because it's part of a specific series. I'm also going to break out the Carol M. Schwiller story that's in this issue, because I have been wanting to do a deep dive reading everything I can get my hands on by Carol M. Schwiller, preferably in order of publication, but obviously this is actually our second to last published piece. And I want to cover it now as part of this magazine, but it's also a story in my Carol M. Schwiller exploration, so I want that in as well. And then there's Sexy Robot Mom, the third story in Sandra McDonald's series. Or no, this is the second story in Sandra McDonald's series about sexy robots. Sexy Robot Cowboys being the first, which I've already talked about. So I'm going to break that out as part of that series. And the rest of them I'm going to talk about right now. I thought this was a good issue. There weren't any Nebula or Hugo Fine stories from this issue. It's all strictly um, it's all strictly stories that, I mean, they might have placed in the Asimov's Readers Poll, but as far as I know, did not place in any rewards. But that doesn't mean it's not an excellent issue. Okay, so the lead story, of course, is The Last Judgment by James Patrick Kelly, which I'm going to do a separate video of. That'll premiere the same week that the week after this video goes up. This video is going up on Saturday. The other breakout videos will be going up during the week following. So the second story you come across in this issue is a short story by Tom Purdom titled Bonding with Maury. Just a short story. It's number 55 in my Tom Purdom bibliography because I do have his works listed on my website, and it may or may not be accurate. A little bit about Purdom is that he started writing way back in 1957, so he was doing it for quite a long time. He only died last year, 2024. He's from New Haven, Connecticut. He only published a total of 69 works that I'm aware of. He also worked as a music critic, and he published a few novels in his career. So he's not a really well-known science fiction writer, but he had been doing it for quite a few years. He's done quite a few works, and maybe at least I am interested in digging deeper into his work. So Bonding with Maury, what happens in it? A guy named Maury Largan gets a personal robot assistant. A little bit of a theme here. At first it's just a machine, but he gradually starts seeing this machine as a friend. And that the story gradually takes you through the changes of his attitudes from initially absolutely hating this idea of having this robot personal assistant to a point in the story where he feels that the assistant is actually his only friend, his best friend. Stories of this nature have their origin in strange playfellow. At least I'm not aware of an earlier story like this about a robot that becomes a friend to somebody or a family. So it shares an idea with Asimov's strange playfellow, and I think Asimov was the first to do that. There's not much about this story that can really be considered new. It's just a recasting of familiar material, but it's well written and it's very enjoyable. Worth looking up, worth reading. And like I say, I want to dig deeper and find out more about Tom Purdom's writing. Third story in the issue, Sexy Robot by Sandra McDonald. I've already said I'm going to cover that in a separate video because it's number 2 in the Sexy Robot series. And so I want to cover that series entirely on its own. And so after that is a story by Gary Reinhardt titled Sensitive Compartmented. It's just a short story. And a little bit about Gary Reinhardt because I'm not familiar with him either. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He first published in 2007. He had a career in the Air Force, and at the time of the publication of his magazine, which is 2012, he was an editor at Bay Books. I don't know if he's still there. I guess not, but maybe he is. I don't know. This particular story was his first sale in Asimov science fiction. The story is about Holly, who has been altered to be able to read minds. She works for the military as kind of like a spy. She's sent on surveillance missions where it's just her in the air, kind of a drone-like vehicle. It's enough to hold her up. On her current mission, she is shot down and captured by the Russians. And it turns out they also have one of these telepath spies that is capable of flying over a city and catching people's thoughts and getting sensitive information that way. I won't give more of it. I won't spoil it. It's a good story. It's exploring how technology causes ordinary people to fear her. These telepath spies are feared by everybody else because all they have to do is walk down the street near you and they're able to see everything that's in your mind. So people don't like these people. And it causes these telepaths to live in a very alienated life. I wouldn't call the story great, but I would say it's worthwhile. It's worth looking up. And, well, gotta see if Gary Reinhardt shows up in the future. Maybe an interesting author to pay attention to. Next story is by Ian Creasy, and it's titled Souvenirs. Just a short story. Ian Creasy is another author I'm not too familiar with. He was born in 1969, so young, and he's published quite a few shorter works, but no novels since his first publication in 1999. He's continuing to publish today, and he's living in Yorkshire, England. In Souvenirs, Kendra is selling souvenirs at a busy spaceport, just with a card table. And there's lots of people like this that go to the spaceport and they have different types of souvenirs. They set up a folding table, they sell it to the travelers, tourists. And on the day in the story, she sells a rare artifact to an alien who then pays for it with counterfeit money. So she's not going to put up with this. She starts investigating. She eventually tracks this alien spacer down. I won't go deeper than that. It's an enjoyable story, worth reading. Not outstanding, not great, but definitely worthwhile. I enjoyed it. After that comes Something Real by Rick Wilbur. It's a novelette. It's the first in a series. The series is titled Moberg, and Moberg is the main character of the stories. And there are 4 other stories that follow. And I think I wanted to explore this series because of what this story is. First of all, a little bit about Rick Wilbur. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri on September 4th, 1948. Yay, September. He currently has published 4 novels and a lot of short works. He seems to have a passion for baseball. His first published work was 1980. It was in 1980. Continuing to publish today. He's still alive and still publishing. He has not won or finalized for a Hugo or Nebula today. Full-time, he teaches journalism and mass media at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Now this story, of course, because of his passion for baseball, this story has a baseball connection. And there's a little bit you got to understand about it. Mo Baird was a real person, and he was a baseball player. He was not a great baseball player, but he was a Major League Baseball player. He played in the 1930s, and this is history. This isn't just a story. This is what Rick Wilbur drew upon to create his story is the real life of Mo Berg, if you've never heard of him. He was still a baseball player in 1943. In 1944, he is enlisted in the military as a spy, mainly because, and again, this is real, he had the reputation of being the smartest guy in baseball because on his own, he read and studied physics and mathematics at a very high level. He was understanding relativity and quantum mechanics at a time when most people had never even heard of those things. And so because of his deep but amateur knowledge of all this, the military saw that he was capable of going to Europe and trying to talk top scientists in leaving Germany and coming to America, coming to the United States. So at one point, he was actually sent with the mission of attending a physics lecture in Zurich where Heisenberg is talking. Reason being, and this again is history, Heisenberg was in charge of Germany's nuclear power program. Mo Berg was sent to try to determine how advanced Heisenberg was, whether or not he was close to developing a bomb. And if he was, Berg was sent into that lecture with a gun in his pocket, and he was directed to assassinate Heisenberg. The real life story, real life history is that he determined Heisenberg was not very close to having a bomb, and so he did not assassinate Heisenberg. Now that's most of what the story is relating this history. It's real history, okay? You can look it up. I did, because I started reading this and I'm going, no, this can't be real. And I looked it up. I looked up Mo Berg and I looked up Heisenberg and I read about these things. Heisenberg was in charge of a nuclear power program for Germany, mainly intended to create a reactor that could generate electrical power in power cities. He did not come close to developing a bomb, and Mo Berg was sent in to determine this. Berg had gone over and met with a lot of other top physicists and mathematicians in Germany and Europe and tried to help them leave and go to the United States. This is real history. This is history books, okay? And that's the bulk of the story so far. But throughout this story, as he goes over and he meets with Fermi in Italy, because Fermi is able to get him into this lecture in Zurich. And at different places in Chicago and in Italy and again in Zurich, there's this woman that he notices. She keeps popping up and she seems to be watching him. Now that is not history, okay? That is the fictional story, that there's this woman following him. Okay, and I gotta give some spoilers here, because what makes this a science fiction story is, first of all, a bit of alternate history, because there are some twists to real history at the end of the story. And second is that the woman turns out to be from the future, and she's trying to recruit Mo Berg to join her and help her with affecting history and trying to make history turn out a certain way. Okay. So that's where the rest of the series comes. 4 more stories follow this, with Mo Berg and this woman going to different parts of history and trying to affect things to a more positive a more positive outcome for the future, in the eyes of the woman anyway. And one of the ways you know that you're reading an alternate history is that all of a sudden the Hindenburg is still flying. 1944 and the Hindenburg is still in the air. You know, we know the Hindenburg crashed in the 1930s. In this story, it's still flying. So, science fiction, guys. Alternate history. But it's a really fascinating story, really engaging story, very entertaining. And the history is fascinating. Like I say, I wasn't aware of this history. I just learned something, and it's cool, and I love it. And I want more of this series. I won't call this a top tale. It doesn't quite get there, but it's definitely recommended. I really enjoyed it. At this point, one of the very best stories in this issue. And if anything in this issue would get a Hugo or Nebula finalist vote, I think this would be one of them, but it didn't. So from there, I go on to Greener by Josh Rosenman, which is just a short story. Josh Rosenman is another author I do not know anything about. He's from Hollywood. I did not know anything about, but I looked up a few facts here. He's from Hollywood, Florida. He's written 22 short works between 2009 and 2018, but hasn't published anything since. I don't see anything saying that he has died, but he hasn't been publishing. He mainly does, for his living, he mainly does voices for audiobooks. He lives in Georgia, and he did publish one novel in 2017. So what's Greener about? A guy named Scott has ended his marriage, and he goes out with a friend who has set him up with Tina. Now, Tina has been contracted to show Scott a good time, but Scott really misses his wife. The story's very well written, but I mean, there's not a lot about it that you could call science fiction. It is technically science fiction, but if you call Tina a prostitute, it wouldn't be science fiction. It's a good story, but not really my preference, not really my taste. So the next story is the Carol M. Schwiller story. It's her second to last published story before she died. I'm going to cover this one in a breakout video, so look for that coming up very soon. The final story in this issue of Asimov is again by an author that I'm not familiar with, David Ira Cleary. It's a novella, so it was a fairly long one. And it's titled Living in the 80s. A little bit about Cleary. He has written a small number of short stories since 1989, but has slowed drastically since 2012. He has still been publishing more recently, but not much since 2012. The majority of what he's published was published between 1989 and 2012. His full-time job is as a technical writer, and he lives in Oakland. I'm assuming California, but my information did not say anything about it. So the story, living in the 80s. A guy named Clayton tells his friend Bob that he has found a website that can be used as a time machine. Clayton wants to go to 2025. No, you don't. Bob wants to go back to 1986. Remember, this story is essentially set in 2012. And Bob says he wants to go back for the music, but actually what he wants to do is try to change the past, because he feels he caused a series of events that led to his girlfriend being drunk and driving and going off of a bridge and dying in the car crash below. And he wants to try and change that. So both Bob and Clayton make, they switch off. Clayton going back to going forward into the future, and what Clayton wants to do is find a cure for diabetes. He wants to go in the future and bring back and get cured of diabetes and come back. Well, the time travel in this story doesn't quite work that way. You can go to the future and get cured of diabetes, but when you come to the past, the cure becomes ineffective and you still have diabetes because there was no cure in 2012. But Bob's attempts are a little more effective. He's going back into 1986 and he does make some changes. And history does change. When he comes back, he notices things are a little different than what they were. So Bob is actually affecting things, but not really what he wants to achieve. He never does. He keeps failing to achieve the saving of his girlfriend. I'm going to stop with that and not spoil it any farther. This was a remarkable story. It was a very, very good, interesting time travel story. The time travel, there's a little bit of a new twist on it. A website that you click buttons on the website and it initiates your time travel. That's kind of a new thing, but otherwise the idea of trying to change the past or trying to go to the future and also having your changes not be quite what you expect, that's been done before, but it's done very, very well here. It may not be terribly new territory, but it is done very intelligently and very enjoyably. I wouldn't call this a top tale. I wouldn't call this great, but really, really good. I would recommend this story. And it's just too bad we haven't seen more from David Ira Cleary. I think he's an excellent writer based on this story. And I'm going to look forward to reading more of his work. It's got interesting characters, good plot, fair amount of humor. I enjoy it. So that is it for Asimov science fiction in April, May, I said. April, May 2012. Have you read any of those stories or that issue of Asimov's? Leave your comments. I want to hear what you have to say about the content of this issue. And definitely come back and look for my breakout stories from this issue by James Patrick Kelly, Carol Schwiller, and Sandra McDonald. I really enjoyed the issue. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. And I hope I've inspired you, if not to look up this issue, which you have to find a used copy of. But I did. It wasn't that difficult. But if you don't want to go through that, trying to find these old issues of Asimov's, definitely give a try to the current magazines. I'm trying to work my way back up to the May, June 2025 issue of Asimov's and talk about that. These magazines have a rich history. Asimov's only goes back to 1977. They've published so many brilliant works. Hugo and Nebula Award winners. Started the careers of really awesome authors and just published a lot of enjoyable stories, even authors that didn't take off and become remembered. They still published really nice works in this magazine and in Analog and Magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction. I do hope the magazines will survive. They're having troubles. They've been having troubles. They've been losing readership. They've been losing subscriptions. Amazon pulled a fast one that really hurt almost every magazine out there. The magazines are struggling, but they are good things. They're publishing really good fiction. They're publishing awesome authors. A lot of authors you never heard of, you're going to discover for your first time in these magazines. And many times, these authors are publishing their very first stories. And, as well as the newer magazines like Uncanny and Clark's World, Lightspeed, Apex, those are good magazines too. All these magazines are producing really terrific short fiction that you should be paying at least a little bit of attention to. If not subscribing, at least once in a while picking them up and giving it a shot and checking these authors out. Um, it's a way that it's always been a way for young authors to get their foot in the door and get their career rolling and eventually get to where they can publish whole novels and whole series with the big publishers. It's always been important to um, keeping the genres fresh and new and alive, as well as keeping touch with what some of the old guard are doing, like James Patrick Kelly and Carol Emshwiller. Those are, people. James Patrick Kelly goes all the way back to the 1980s. Carol Emshwiller was publishing in the 1950s. Tom Purdom was publishing in the 1950s. These people have been around. They are excellent authors, and their work is almost always worth checking out. And then you check out those authors that you never heard of, and you often run into pleasant surprises, really pleasant surprises, like I did in this issue. I got a couple of people I need to add to my bibliographies on my website because I want to check out more of their work. Even if I don't do a deep dive, I still want to read some more of their work. I really enjoyed this, and I want to see if they did other things that I'm going to enjoy as much. So the magazines are important. I feel it is important to keep these things going in some form or another. I mean, some magazines are going to fade and die for financial reasons or mismanagement reasons or whatever. But we need to keep short fiction going. It is a great medium and a great way for young authors to get their start before they have the experience to tackle a whole novel. Okay, so I hope you'll stay with me as I go through more Asimov's magazines, and I am still hoping to get back to my Weird Tales exploration, which will lead into amazing stories when I get to 1926. Um, I'm committed to doing all those, and I'm going through them and reading stuff and reporting on all that stuff here. So come on back, and I'll try to get to the new magazines also. There is one, the latest issue of Apex just came out last week. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to do one video talking about all the stories in it. And I hope you'll come back and join me for all those. Till then, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Keep coming back to Telltale Books for more content like this. And I hope you'll be seeing you.